Oh my goodness, I've got a state in my hair. At this point in the coronavirus, you're just gonna have to excuse my hair. Hey folks, it's Finn. Welcome back folks, lovely to see you. So today's video is a bit of a mental health catch up, a bit of a check-in and chat, shall we say. So a few weeks ago, at the start of the coronavirus pandemic here in the UK, I made a video about how it was having an impact on my anxiety and on some of the ways that I was managing my anxiety. But since then, a lot has changed because we are now on full lockdown here in the UK. And so a lot of the things that I was doing to manage my anxiety are no longer applicable. And other things have changed, which means that I'm having to just look at different ways to manage my anxiety. So today, I wanted to catch up about that and catch up about the new ways I've been managing my anxiety under the new circumstances. And towards the end of this video, I also want to share some recent changes that are further complicating how I manage my anxiety and how I might deal with those. So let's have a check-in and chat. So unsurprisingly, many people are finding that their mental health is struggling a bit in light of the pandemic. And for those of us who have pre-existing mental health conditions like I do with anxiety, the pandemic made things even more difficult. And my biggest issue really was that I challenged my anxiety by telling it that there is nothing to be afraid of. But that was a bit difficult when the pandemic arrived. So initially, I was having to work extra hard to make myself keep going out and keep facing that anxiety, and to allow myself to take extra measures in place, like wearing a mask, taking extra hand sanitizer, and going a little bit over the top to protect myself, just to quieten my anxiety. But then they put us in lockdown. Now, going into lockdown brought up a lot of interesting stuff for me, because it removed all of my usual ways of challenging my anxiety. I know what happens with me. If I let my anxiety keep me indoors, if I let my anxiety stop me from doing the things I want to do in my life, it's a perpetual cycle of then my anxiety getting worse. Anxiety never goes away if you just give in to it. My anxiety's never gone completely, but what I have learned to do is to challenge my anxiety and still do things, because I can now know that my anxiety isn't going to kill me, that I can manage things with anxiety and it's okay. So the way I keep that going is by continually going out, continually putting myself in situations that make me anxious so that I can have control. I might not be able to stop my body from producing anxiety, but I can control my response to it. But now that option's removed. Being in lockdown sent a message to my anxiety that it really was something to be afraid of. So my anxiety went up an even huger level than it already was. And I think one of the most difficult things for me in lockdown has been to learn to live with this now higher base level of anxiety. I already had a base level of anxiety that's higher than the average population who doesn't have anxiety, but it was my normal. And so I had got used to living at that level. Now my anxiety's come up another level and I've had to be getting used to that new level. So with the lockdown and with being allowed out once a day for exercise, I was pushing myself to still get outside initially, but it was exhausting. The sheer effort it took to override my anxious thoughts that it wasn't safe, I pushed myself outside. And I find it really difficult outside now, not just because there is a real tangible threat, but also because of the way we're interacting. Now, I've had to teach myself to make eye contact with people. My default position is head down, don't look at anyone, don't talk to anyone. I tried going through life like that and it wasn't very successful. For me to talk to people, for me to look at people is still tough. And all of a sudden, people are now more of a threat than ever, and a lot of people are acting in a similar way though. When you're outside, everyone's kind of head down or not looking at each other. At least that's our experience here. And so I had that to contend with going out as well. This different way of like moving away from people, where I've trained myself for years not to do that. I mean, me and Chris went shopping and we went round the corner and almost collided with this other person, and I kind of squeaked and ran away. You know, I just literally jumped away, and this person laughed. But that, to me, is kind of like my old behaviour with anxiety. So I'm now acting in a way because I need to. I need to stay that 2 metres away from people. But the behaviour it's bringing up is the old anxious behaviour. So it was getting to be so much of a challenge to go out that it was lowering my mood further. By forcing myself out every day, my mood was getting worse, because the trouble is with anxiety, I can push through it, but the huge spike of adrenaline that causes means that I get a lot of actual physical symptoms. I get an upset stomach, I can feel sick, I can have diarrhea, I can have palpitations. It's absolutely uncomfortable and exhausting. And after I push through anxiety, I'm often wiped out for days. So in the beginning, with challenging my anxiety, I was then making my mood worse because I was absolutely wiped out. So I adapted to just going out once or twice a week, and I waited for my partner to be home. And this has been really hard for me, to go back to a state where I need support to get out. And it's really hard for me to not see that as a setback. It's taken me years to be able to get out on my own. And it worries me that now I'm having to have other people's help to get out. But with Chris next to me, it was feeling more manageable, because it isn't just the worry of being outside, it isn't just this kind of having to be away from people, it's the social space negotiation as well that I'm struggling with. You know, if we've got a narrow pavement and someone's coming towards me and there's a road, and I start thinking about where am I going to walk, what am I going to do, I start spiralling and panic. So with Chris with me, he can step in and then guide me to one side, guide me back, and that's just been really helpful. And I'm having to just accept that this is how it is right now. It doesn't mean I've taken a step back. It just means this is how it is for now. It may well mean that when it comes to the end of lockdown, that I find I need some help, because I cannot imagine I'm going to come out of this without some anxiety setback, and it's going to be really hard to return to normal living after this. But I think the way I'm managing it now is just to let myself be however I am. If I'm only going out once a week and it's with the help of my partner, then it's okay. You know, and I think that's a big part of my self-care right now, whilst this pandemic is happening, is to just allow myself to feel and act in whatever way I need to, because just coping with all the changes of daily life is enough, without expecting myself to keep acting the way I was before the pandemic. You know, none of us are. We're all changed for the moment anyway. And so for those of us who have conditions that are impacted by this, of course it's going to make it harder. So my biggest thing is about giving myself a break. But now we've introduced a new problem. So the change I mentioned at the beginning. So this new normal that I'd got used to, so I'd started with the pandemic happening and dealing with this new anxiety. Then we had the lockdown happen and I had to get used to that. I just got myself on a level of how I was managing. And then Chris got a phone call at work from his doctor the other day, and she put him onto shielding. He's on full lockdown, no going out. Chris has asthma, he's had some problems with his chest over the last year, and he's been on steroids a few times, steroids and antibiotics. And that now puts him at increased risk if he catches coronavirus of needing to be ventilated, put in hospital. So his doctor advised that he shield. So what did I do? Panicked. I don't deal with change. One of the side effects of my mental health conditions is the inability to manage change, especially sudden change. It sends me into a bit of a meltdown. So I did have a bit of a meltdown. Sorry, Chris. Over here in the UK, shielding means that you don't go anywhere for 12 weeks. You stay in, you have food delivered, you shield yourself from other people. At the moment, people who are vulnerable like Chris have been told to shield until the end of June, but that might have to be revised. He might be shielding until we get an antidote or a vaccine, who knows. So that left us with two options. With Chris shielding and needing to remain safe, it was either that we lived separately in the flat. We've got a spare room, my office, so the answer would be, if I wanted to still go out once a week, then I would need to make sure to separate myself from Chris. So that would have meant separate rooms, separate bathrooms, not sleeping together, not touching together, sitting distanced away from each other in the lounge. Basically just separating ourselves from each other as much as possible within a flat. Not the greatest thought in the world. The other option, rather than do all that, was for me to shield as well. And that's what we've decided to do. Because for my mental health and for our relationship, to try and live like that for an unforeseeable amount of time would just be too much pressure and would have damaged both of our mental health. So we are now both shielding at home. So we're still working out what exactly that means. Chris works in retail, so really anything away from that is a bonus. Even if we just choose to go out once a week, like very open space, just on the seafront, that would probably be okay. It's just being around other people and in enclosed places that he's really at risk, and certainly just to stay away from people as much as he possibly can. So we are now working out what shielding means to us and what it's going to look like. He's now at home. I've got a loud northerner in my workspace without a mute button. So there's now going to be lots of negotiation. It's only day one today, so I might make a video in a week's time and I might just be greyer than I am. So we're going to work out our new normal here again. So my anxiety is now much higher because once again, my routine's off the wall again. I have no end date to when this is going to change. I now am extra worried about Chris getting the virus. So I'm back to being really high anxiety all over again, and it's really, really hard to deal with. So by now, I should just be able to be used to the fact that things don't stay the same for more than 5 minutes at a time. So there is lots of new routine to get used to, and like every time it's changed so far, when it changed from normal life to pandemic, when it changed from pandemic to lockdown, and when it changed from lockdown to shielding, these things take time to adapt to. But I have evidence I've adapted before and I will again. And the other stuff that I've been doing throughout all of this still applies. And the main one of those really is self-care. Allowing myself to just be however I be. Don't push myself to be a certain way. And that's my advice to anyone really, because there's lots of stuff online. You see lots of posts about using this time productively to do gardening, learn a new hobby and all of that. But for some of us, just getting through the day is a big achievement, let alone starting a new hobby. There is loads of amazing stuff online to help, but also that can bring up a lot of fear of missing out. Am I checking into the right places? Am I, using all the stuff that's available? Am I, as a person that creates content, doing enough? All of this can just add to the worry, when actually right now, my focus and everybody's focus should be and looking after ourselves as best as we can. And then if we've got stuff left over, then we help others. It's the oxygen mask thing all over again, isn't it? When the plane's going down, your oxygen masks come down, you put your own on first, then you can help other people's. And the same applies here. It's about self-care and doing the best you can on a daily basis. So I feel like this was a bit of a waffle video today, but I really do hope that helped in some way. I wanted to catch up on where I am from my last video on the coronavirus pandemic and my anxiety. And perhaps by sharing, I've helped, or at the very least, there's just some solidarity in that, if you're feeling this way, you're not the only one. Or at the very least, I occupied 10-15 minutes of your time. To give you some kind of takeaway message from this, a sum up, I suppose, would be just to be gentle on yourself. Don't set yourself ridiculous targets and things to do right now. I think we need to all remember that our brains and bodies are having to work really hard right now to adapt to all of these new situations, to adapt to this invisible threat that's there all the time. And we can't expect a huge amount of ourselves right now other than to survive on a daily basis and get through. And if that's what you're doing, you are succeeding. Finn says. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and you want to support my content, I would be so grateful if you consider subscribing to my channel, because it really does help more than you realise. And if you want to see more of my mental health videos, tips, tricks and advice, I shall link you to a playlist here. Thanks for watching, folks. Keep on keeping on. See you next week.